Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 3 Point Weekly. We are going to be moving on from the Eastern Conference grades we did earlier in the week, and we'll now be discussing the Western Conference. We will be starting with the defending champs, the Denver Nuggets, and working our way down to give our thoughts on the draft, free agency, all the trades that have gone on. And we'll start with a team that has one of the biggest departures in free agency, and Bruce Brown leaving Denver Nuggets. We'll start with you, Gabe. How do you feel about where they're at so far with doing well to bring in a bunch of guys during the draft, but have lost Jeff Green, have lost Thomas Bryant, and have lost Bruce Brown?
Yeah, man, they're definitely going to rely a lot on some of those drafted guys panning out to really fill in for these bench spots because Bruce Brown leaving is one thing. Jeff Green leaving, that's like they played 8 guys in that rotation. That's all of a sudden a whole quarter of your rotation that's just out the door. Not to mention Thomas Bryant played a lot of quality minutes in the regular season to give, Jokic a little bit of rest during the long 82 games. Didn't play a lot in the playoffs, but, it takes a lot of wear and tear to even get that far in the first place. So as far as rounding out their bench depth, they've definitely set themselves at a little bit more of a disadvantage. It might be an uphill battle to repeat. We do know how long just going on a full long playoff run like that can really take the energy out of a team and make the following season even harder due to that shortened offseason. So they kind of come into next year looking a little thin. But if they can draft anything like they drafted last year, getting a guy like Christian Brown that came in and just instantly contributed year one and contributed to a championship effort, if they can do that again, they might be set up for more success. Either way, though, this team is going to return to the top of the West next year. And it's not like it's bad vibes in Denver at all. You're coming off a title. Just don't get that title high. Keep just playing hard. And I think Jokic and Murray are 2 guys that will lead the kind of team that's going to do that, as well as Coach Michael Malone doing good things over there. They're going to be in strong contention to run it back, I think, and we just have to see where it goes for them.
Yeah, it was kind of like the writing was on the wall before the season was even over, before they even won the championship, because the talks was it's going to be tough to keep like this core group of guys together. And obviously with Bruce Brown getting the contract that he got, you can't really match that money. So shout out to Bruce for getting his bag. But pretty much what Gabe said, man, they're going to be looking to the guys that they drafted and also guys that have been in their organization, like Christian Brown, to continue to get better. And I like what they took with Julian Strawther out of Gonzaga, and I also think Jalen Pickett out of Penn State can maybe provide something for them too. Reggie Jackson's probably going to be relied on a little more. I don't know how I feel about that, but he is a veteran. Maybe he can just give them solid minutes once the playoff comes around, because the way Jamal Murray elevates in the postseason, you don't need that much guard production from a backup point guard. So hopefully Reggie can just be solid for them. But like Gabe said, they still got their core guys. Michael Malone's still one of the best coaches in basketball. They're going to be right there again next year, and we'll just see how guys develop, because they're going to be relying on a lot of the young guys to continue to show strides and prove themselves.
Yeah, deciding to use your mid-level exception on the first night of free agency on Reggie Jackson was certainly a decision by the Nuggets front office, to say the least, but the rest of what they got going on is at least exciting and has some upside. When you talk about the rookies, when you talk about Christian Braun probably now stepping into that Bruce Brown type role heading into next year. So we're going to get to see even more opportunity from him, get to see more freedom from him on the offensive end. So there's a lot to look forward to there. We'll see how much that depth actually pans out and who ends up being the key guys moving into next year, who's behind Braun off the bench. As far as their playoff rotation goes, maybe Payton Watson becomes more of a key member of the rotation heading into next year and into the postseason. But like you guys said, they're going to be great in the regular season. That's not in doubt. We'll just have to see what guy number 7, guy number 8, guy number 9 give for them and who those guys end up being as they get into the postseason.
Definitely. Jeff Green is a kind of a tough loss too, even though like his production doesn't speak for it. But I just like having. They had a lot of like true vets on this team. We kind of talked about this before, but they had like guys that have a lot of NBA experience outside of like their top guys. So that's something that is very tough to replace. So that's why like you see DeAndre Jordan gets re-signed, because you got to keep some type of veteran leadership on that team. So we see why DJ is able to keep a job, but it's tough to bring guys like Jeff Green, who was pretty sought after in free agency, because he can still play some good basketball.
Yeah, and even thinking about it now, like, as long as they can get by on maybe a more thin roster for the first half of the season, they could easily be a team that just throws out a second-round pick at the trade deadline and brings in a quality role player. You see that all the time. It's not like it takes a lot of assets to build something like that. Like, I'm convinced they can get a Jeff Green-level guy for a second-round pick. That's just the way trades work nowadays, especially for guys like that while valuable members of a team, when it comes to a trade talk, it's like there's not really a lot that trades hands there.
Yeah, for sure. They'll definitely still have a way to potentially add a vet before all is said and done and they get to the postseason next year. But ultimately, we'll just see who ends up emerging on the roster and becomes those guys behind Christian Brown coming in the next year. But that brings us to the Grizzlies, where our boy Reek's point guard Marcus Smart was shipped out. Tyus Jones has now gone. He is no longer the best backup point guard in the league because he's no longer a backup. Derrick Rose is gone there. Josh Christopher has been traded there, which we'll get to more later when I share my frustrations about the Rockets. And Desmond Bane got his bag as well, deservedly so.
I'll start, man. First off, shout out to Bane for getting his bag. I didn't expect to see that big of a payday, but small market team, you got to kind of pay to keep your guys, and he's somebody that's shown drastic improvement in his first few years in the league. So I can only expect him to get better as time goes on. The smart move, it does suck losing Tyus Jones, but I think Marcus Smart can fill in a little bit of what Jones does while doing like a lot of what Dillon Brooks was able to do defensively, but a little better leadership, has a lot more experience, has been to a number of conference finals, been to an NBA finals. I think this team kind of needs that. That's why I also like the Derrick Rose move. That's somebody that's been through a lot in the league. He's been from a number one option to a guy that wasn't getting minutes on a playoff team last year. So he's seen it all. I think that's a very good guy to have, especially with like John Morant and all the situations that he has had off the court. I think Derrick Rose is a good guy to have. We'll see. I do like taking a flyer on Josh Christopher. I feel like he's somebody that's shown he's talented enough to get NBA minutes. It's just Houston is kind of dysfunctional. Wasn't able to get on the court consistently there, but he's somebody that definitely has a nice game. And I'll be interested to see how he's able to produce in Memphis. And G.G. Jackson, I feel like that was a steal of a pick. I had like a first-round grade on him personally. So the fact that they were able to get him in the middle of the second round, I think was an excellent pick. And Memphis is very good at developing guys. And they got a lot of guys that are probably going to have to step up. We've seen Jake LaRavia in Summer League. Maybe like David Roddy. G.G. Jackson could be in that pool too, Zaire Williams. Like they got a lot of young wing players that are going to be fighting for minutes. So we'll see which one of those guys are the strongest of the bunch and will be able to produce for this team.
Yeah, I think the guys that they brought in as well just have a really good fit, not only just basketball-wise, but just with the overall aura of this organization. Like Marcus Smart, he kind of embodied Boston when he was there. Like he was like the heart and soul of that team. But I feel like he comes into this team and he kind of has that like Dillon Brooks dog in him with way better production, right? So going off of that, it's like the lineup might look a little bit small, but the fact that Marcus Smart is the caliber of defender he is, I think that makes up for it and keeps it fine, even if they do end up running a lineup that's like John Morant, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane. I think that's like one of the scenarios where, yeah, you can be small and you can get away with it, especially when so much of your defense hinges on Jaren Jackson's impact anyways. It's like they should be fine and they're still going to be good defensively, even with that size downgrade. Beyond that, I'm really interested to see what Derrick Rose does because, as we know, he did not play very much with the Knicks last season, but I feel like he still has something to contribute, and I think a lot of people do. Now, how will he pan out? I'm not sure. A lot of times there are guys that get signed, and it's like name value, like this looks cool, and they don't really end up doing much because let's not act like the Knicks were a bad team last year. Like Derrick Rose could have contributed to winning basketball. It just wasn't in the cards. So I do hope he gets a shot here, and I think with Ja missing the early portions of the season, it should definitely give him a chance to shine. So I'm excited to watch the beginning of the season just to see how these new pieces fit in, and then it's going to be like kind of a second new beginning when Ja comes back from his suspension, and it's like, now how does all of this really fit together in this puzzle? But I think overall, just having that veteran impact of Marcus Smart is going to be so huge for what this franchise does, and Derrick Rose being a guy whose play style in his prime was very similar to what John Morant does now should just only further his development. And I think he could take him to even greater heights than he's ever been.
Yeah, the Marcus Smart addition was definitely important. And with Dillon Brooks out the door, they definitely needed that defense from a culture standpoint because Brooks was a big part of their culture. You can debate how south that went over the last half of the season. But previous to that, at least, he was very important to their culture. The biggest question now is their wings, because like you said, depending on the team, you can probably roll with the Ja, Bane, Smart lineup, but some teams, regardless of how good Smart is defensively, are just going to eat that up. They're just going to be too long. They're going to have too much size. They're going to have too much physicality, especially when you consider the fact that Brandon Clark's going to be out for the majority of, if not the entirety of next season. Memphis is going to be small again next year. So that's something you have to consider. And it's something that they just haven't been able to replace. And since they traded away Rudy Gay to the Raptors a decade ago, they just haven't been able to have a small forward consistently on this team. And next year's probably going to be no different. You guys alluded to the young guys that are going to have to take a step. They're definitely going to need that because right now, starting lineup or bench, they just don't have wings. And that's the biggest concern. Jaren can clean up a lot, but they're going to need someone, whether it's a Roddy, whether it's Lavravia, whether it's Gigi Jackson, whether it's Zaire Williams. Someone needs to give them some amount of consistent minutes on the wing. Otherwise, they might really find it tough at times. They'll probably be fine through the regular season, but especially come postseason time, if you don't have a wing or two that you can rely on to at least give you decent minutes, it could be a tough going for them depending on the matchup.
I mean, they came back to bite them in the playoffs, down the stretch against LA. I mean, Braun was getting matched up against Xavier Tillman. It's just like, if you don't got any wings to match up with the elite wings in the league, it's going to be tough. And it's so funny that you say it because I was literally thinking as you were talking, ever since they traded Rudy, they've been running guys like Shane Battier. Tony Allen was on the wing. They had I forget, like Tayshaun Prince was running wing for them some years. Like they just were just rotating guys in and out. And it's really been a problem for like a decade. And Dylan Brooks for like all the, I guess, not even awkward stuff, but just, him making news, off of the floor for whatever reason. He was pretty solid for them for, the type of production that they had previous, like in the Gasol, Randolph, and Conley era. Like he was pretty good for, all of the issues that he was bringing, in the media and stuff. So, they got guys that have young talent potential, but who's going to step up? I'm not sure. I was disappointed to see Zaire Williams. First he was hurt, and then he kind of took a step back last season after a promising rookie year. So there's just more guys in there that, have an opportunity. It's just somebody has to rise to the top, at least, because they got guys that are there to do it, but who's going to do it? That's to be seen. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and having to play a little bit small, I think it is good for them that it can pass a little bit more in the regular season. I think it will be more of a playoff issue as it's been in the past few years. They've been able to rack up a lot of wins and be a very quality regular season team, no matter what the quality of their wings has been recently. So if some of those guys, especially the younger guys, can kind of just develop throughout the course of the season and then be ready to go come playoff time, that should put them on a very nice pace heading into next postseason.
It'll definitely be what they're relying on. They're going to need that to have that postseason success. But a team that's coming off some postseason success made sure that they kept their guys around in the Sacramento Kings. Harrison Barnes is back. Trey Lyles is back. Alex Len is even back. And they've added in Chris Duarte via trade as well, which officially went through today as we're recording this. So none of those flashy moves that some people might have hoped for. None of the Kyle Kuzma or Jeremy Grant signings, but they made sure that their core guys were back and they were going to remain competitive for next season.
It sucks. It sucks that Jeremy Grant signed that contract so quickly and Dame requested out the next day because that was the move I really wanted to see. But given that there was really no way for them to upgrade too much, I like getting the guys back. Take a flyer on Duarte. I think they're really banking on, like, Keegan Murray's been hooping in Summer League. I know you take it with a grain of salt, but I know they're banking on him coming back year two, being an even more productive player. So, the Kings, they did their job. They took a couple flyers on some young guys, re-signed Harrison Barnes for a pretty friendly contract. So, I think that's pretty solid. Just hopefully they can replicate that success. De'Aaron Fox can come back and be in all-star conversations again. Same thing for Sabonis, and I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think they played it a little safe, and I really do understand it. When you come off of a 17-year playoff drought, I mean, you don't really want to change the status quo too much. Now, would it have been cool to see them let Harrison Barnes walk and make a splash in free agency? Yeah, and I don't think no matter what they would have done, it would have taken them out of playoff contention. I think this team is here to stay just because so much of that change was based on the coaching change. And so as long as Mike Brown is running the operations there, I think things are going to be fine. I just hope they still see some more upward trajectory. I wouldn't want to see them plateau this early because they were such a fun team last year. So I don't know. It's like I expected a little bit more, and I'm not going to say it was a bad offseason, but it's quite a mid-off season for them. But if they have a little bit more internal development and just continue to build that chemistry, I could definitely see them replicating most of their success next year.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, Tyrik, they're definitely banking on a big year of development from Keegan Murray and just continued development moving forward for them. I think they're laying their eggs in that basket in terms of what's our way to continue to improve and hopefully be more than just a first round out in the playoffs. And that's not to say that they couldn't have even been better than that last year, because they weren't far off already getting out of the first round. But that seems to be their way of improving right now. They do still have flexibility as far as the trade goes. They do have first round picks to move. They have very tradable contracts if they want to go that route. Now, of course, Sabonis is not getting moved anytime soon because he just got his bag, and deservedly so. But they're still in a position where, like you guys said, at least they're going to remain competitive. And considering where they've been for the last better part of 2 decades, we can't really blame them for just wanting to stay in the mix.
Yeah, we kind of talked about like teams last episode, and I know we're going to talk about it with the Rockets, like teams just making moves because they can. And even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, like I'm glad Gabe said it's kind of mid off season. I would agree with that because it's not flashy, but I think it's better than just making a bunch of splash moves, splash trades, signings that don't really make sense, overpaying for guys. I think this is more solid, and then you keep your guy in Sabonis, even though contract looks a little hefty. He produced for you, and like a small market team, you got to keep your guys. So I don't really have too much of an issue with that. So, if the move was out there, I'm sure they would have made it. But like you said, Devin, they got flexibility moving forward. The Barnes contract is very team friendly for his type of production. And if, they want to make a move, I'm sure a team would probably be willing to trade for Harrison Barnes if it's out there. So, Kuzma, Grant would have been nice, but I think this is fine for them. And, they got their core guys going forward, and we'll see if there's any moves down the line during the season for them.
Yeah, and for the bag that both of those guys commanded in Kuzma and Grant, I'm really not mad at all that they didn't pursue that. Even if, say, those guys didn't sign those contracts with those teams, it's like if they had to shell out that much money for a guy, just like right this instant, like you guys are saying, it's like I don't know if really the right move was there to make them better long term. And bringing back Harrison Barnes on a good deal, it's like most of what was available in the free agent pool, Harrison Barnes was better than most of those guys. So it's like kind of the theme for a lot of teams that are on the better end, just trying to get over that hump this offseason. There wasn't really a ton there to just take that next step since this free agent class was overall pretty weak. So just being able to keep your guys, that's pretty much what I've said for every team in these offseason reviews. It's like if your team had a lot more to lose than to gain and you kept your guys, and bringing in Chris Duarte, I mean, that's probably like the biggest roster move, it feels like. So, I mean, I think if he continues to have some of his production he had, especially his rookie year, like they got just, even if it's minusculely better this offseason, that's all you can really ask for.
No, for sure. They definitely did well to retain their guys. And another team that did well to retain their guy was the Clippers, who kept Russell Westbrook around on a very team-friendly deal. And they've also quietly made a nice little move to get another wing in KJ Martin for a couple second-round picks. We'll get the former Clippers fans' thoughts now. He's shredded the allegations, but he still got it in his past. So we'll get his thoughts.
Come on, bro. Everybody knows I beat the allegations because, dog, I am a big enjoyer of Kawhi Leonard's game, but these dudes are cooked, bro. Next year, I don't really know what else I can say. I've said this about the Clippers so many times in so many different streams and so many different videos. Once again, and I just said this with the Kings literally 5 seconds ago. Oh, they had like a Russell Westbrook to lose, and for the money he was making with them, because we know he made a lot of money last year, but that was the contract that the Jazz bought out, not the contract he signed with the Clippers. So for a guy that didn't make a ton of money with them and being able to bring him back for $4 million, that is great because his production is way better than $4 million a year. Like that is phenomenal value for Russell Westbrook on your team. But at the end of the day, I'm still not moved because the Clippers offseason doesn't matter. What matters for the Clippers is just staying healthy during the season, and even more so in the play. Not even really the regular season, to be honest. They were still able to pull off like a 4 seed without even really having full health, and guys still were pretty in and out throughout the regular season. So it's like I always say with the Clippers, they're going to win games regardless, just because the system and the talent is in place no matter who's in and who's out. But they just got to stay healthy. No real moves they make are ever going to move me until they can stay healthy for a postseason run.
Yeah, it's tough to feel either excited or disappointed with the Clippers because they didn't have much flexibility to begin with. I mean, there were talks about like a Paul George trade potentially. Maybe that happens down the line. Who knows? But like Gabe said, the main thing for them is like staying healthy. That's just the biggest issue. I do like the KJ Martin move. I'm a big enjoyer of Kenyon Martin Jr. I think he's a very productive player. I think Houston probably should try to keep him, man. I feel like he was one of their more productive players for them over the last couple of years. But I think he'll fit in well in LA, man. He can do a lot of different things. And he's continuing to improve as well. And Russ, I love him taking the team friendly deal, man, because I'm sure there might have been a team out there that might have given him a little bit more, but he played so well for them in that second half stretch, and he played really well for them in the playoffs too. Especially defensively, I was so impressed with him on that side of the floor because we haven't seen Russ really play defense in quite some years, man. So I like seeing Russ back, but it's hard to feel much of anything about the Clippers because we just want to see them healthy and see if they can, make a finals push because we haven't been able to see that in the time that they've been together.
Yeah, like you guys said, I mean, it's a good offseason. Great that they kept Russ, and the KJ Martin deal, I think, is going to be a very underrated key addition for them, especially considering the fact, despite that they have good wing depth on paper, it hasn't actually produced that well for them, especially through the back half of last year. So I like that addition. It's younger, more energy, a little bit of fresher legs for them heading into next year. But problem is they don't have enough fresh legs on this team. And like you guys said, they just need to stay healthy. And until they do, it's going to be tough for them. But a team that did have a lot more going on in their offseason, that did get a few more fresher legs, was the Phoenix Suns, who made the most signings in free agency. Made like pretty much half their roster was added via free agency already. Probably still got a couple more moves to go on the fringes, but they were not quiet. They came off rip and made about 4 or 5 signings in the first hour. And although it's at minimum, guys, it's not the worst it probably could have been for them for a team that walked into free agency with absolutely zero depth.
Go ahead, Gabe. I want to hear what you got to say.
They had a lot of work to do, and I think they came out pretty well for the situation they were working with. Like, who your 4 main guys were going to be, as much as it's like 3.5 main guys, because don't even get me started on DeAndre Ayton. I could go on and on, but for having those 4 guys that have to build a roster out of basically nothing, I think that is solid. Like, I think Drew Eubanks is a very decent backup big to have, and Yuta Watanabe, he's a shooter, bro. Like, he's not going to command that much defensive attention because he's probably going to be sharing the floor out of 2 of the 3 of Devin Booker, like Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal at any time he's on the court. So it's like a guy who shoots at that high of a clip while not commanding very much defensive attention because just so many other guys are commanding that and probably drawing double teams and leaving him open. It's like that helps their floor spacing and that can help their offense a lot. And then, I'm not going to sit here and say that guys like Keita Bates-Diop, Josh Okogie, like aren't super mid, but it's bodies to throw out there that'll play and at least give you some hustle, give you some defense, and just be guys that throw at the opposing team. Like Devin says, some fresh legs just to have out there. I think we said last season it was kind of their downfall in the playoffs is that everybody out their bench was just kind of mid. And I feel like this year everybody out their bench is still going to be pretty mid. But at least the star talent is a little bit boosted because I think Bradley Beal will play better than Chris Paul played last year in the postseason. And then at least these guys are fresh and they, there's enough here, I think, to go on a decent little postseason run. And for as much as I'm still not a fan of the Bradley Beal trade, they made it. That's in the past. And I think for having to build a roster with zero money, they did pretty all right.
Yes, we do read Chad Mills. This is an off season for the nerds, for guys like us. Because if you see it on paper, you're like, who are these guys? Like, what kind of value would they bring? I think with the cards that they had, they didn't have much money. They did a pretty solid job. I think Yuta he's probably already their best like spot up shooter. Like right now, they didn't really have much spot up shooting last year, especially in the playoffs after they made all those trades. It was just very, very, very bad. They were relying on like guys like Torrey Craig and Josh Okogie to be like high level jump shooters. And that's asking a lot of those guys, especially when they're your best defenders. So I like that move a lot. Metu can provide a little bit more versatility in the front court, which they kind of lack too. Very solid moves like bringing back Damian Lee. He played good for them in Spurs last year. That's fine. Okogie back. I like what he produced last season for them. It's just really the only thing I'm just still just iffy on is like, what is their point guard situation looking like? Is it Book? Is Book going to be the guy? If so, I'm interested to see him as the lead guard all year long. That's going to be interesting because when he's played in like 8 to 10 game spurts, he's looked good. But that for a full season, that's a bigger workload. That means Bradley Beal's going to have to be healthy. Kevin Durant's going to have to be healthy. And those guys have to be ready to produce throughout the course of the season. So I'm interested to see that. And if it's not Book, if it's a campaign, then that's a small – 3-guard lineup and guys that are not really big-time defenders. I'm interested to see how that's going to look. So still a lot of questions, but for their offseason, for their signings, I feel like Phoenix did a pretty solid job.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I think they did a solid job. The favorite signing that they made that I want to highlight is the Keita Bates-Diop signing, because if he can shoot the three the way he did last year, then the Suns might have their fifth starter in Keita Bates-Diop, or if nothing else, then probably their first guy off the bench. Someone who's always played with really good energy, rebounded fairly well, given you pretty good defense, and shot 39% from three last year. Now, given before then, his next best season was 33%. So I don't know how much we can depend on that, but if you can get even somewhere in the middle of that and he can shoot around 36% for this Suns team next year, that could be a very key signing for them on the wing. I think Eric Gordon plays a pretty good role for them off of the bench as well. Had his moments that were more positive and less positive with the Clippers last year, but if nothing else, is going to be better than what the majority of their bench was last year, and is at least going to get them a few buckets from time to time, which no one was doing for them last year in the postseason. So for what they had, for their limited options, it was definitely a good free agency period for them. And I think it's certainly an improvement from where they were in the postseason just a couple of months ago to where they are today in terms of what's surrounding their core 3 to 4 guys.
I think the good thing is, like, even though I'm not the biggest Eric Gordon guy right now at this stage in his career, and like you said, like Keita, he had the good shooting year last season, but before that, he's like below average 3-point shooter. Those guys are going to be getting a lot of open looks because the amount of attention that Book and KD were already commanding, and say what you want about Bradley Beal, he's still a borderline all-star guard. These guys are going to be getting a lot of open looks. So it's just a matter of making and missing the shots pretty much because Okogie, Keita Bates, Yuta, these guys are going to be getting some really good looks all year long. So, the opportunity is there for them to be high-level shooters because they're going to get a lot of those shots.
Yeah, it's just I think the make or break for this team is just going to be how effective some of these new signings can be on the defensive end, because we know this team is going to be good on the offensive side of the floor. That was kind of a given no matter who they sign, just because when you have 3 offensive superstars of that caliber, 2 offensive superstars, and Bradley Beal's above average, not to slander too heavily, but like they were going to be fine on that end. It's just really going to be like, if Keita Bates-Diop and Josh Okogie can hit these shots, that will be huge because they need their defense on the court desperately without having them be exposed and just completely ruin the floor spacing.
Beal's still really good, Gabe. Don't be too harsh on the guy, man. He's still really good.
Yeah, but I said 3 superstar, and I'm like, okay, I can't call Bradley Beal a superstar.
He's an all-star level offensive player these days.
All-star and superstar are 2 very different things.
Very different, true, but it's better production offensively outside of playmaking than what Chris Paul has been providing for them. Like, they're definitely more explosive, and Beal's gonna garner a lot more just like shot creation and attention defensively than Chris Paul has this past like year and a half or so.
True, Book has to be back in his like bubble bag basically. I feel like that like 1920 year he was pretty much transitioning into that like basically lead playmaker role for them, but then they got Chris Paul down. He could just focus on what his strong suit was. So it's good he has some of that experience already if he does have to take on that burden. And when a fair amount of your passes are going to go to Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, like I can't imagine facilitating on this roster being that hard of a job. However, spoon feeding DeAndre Ayton and it being productive, that might be a little bit more tall of a task.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how that goes. It would definitely help if Campaign looks like a good backup point guard again as well, but that was definitely not something we saw for the majority of last season. So hopefully the point guard play is not too lackluster for the Suns, but that could be something they look to address via trade or in the buyout market later on in the season. But trade options are limited considering they literally don't own a pick until the 2030s. So We'll see how that one goes. But moving on to the Golden
That's
State
crazy.
Warriors, a team who did manage to retain their biggest guy in Draymond Green, but did have a core bench piece walk in Dante DiVincenzo. They'll be hoping to have their rookie Podziemski replace some of that. And Ty Jerome also leaves as well. So they do have some guard minutes that are going to have to get ate up by some young guys. But most importantly, Draymond's back. And as long as the three-man core of Curry, Clay, and Draymond are there, we know the Warriors are going to be in the picture.
They got to conquer those road demons that they had last season, man. They just that's the main thing for me. Like they got to do that. Bringing Draymond back, didn't see Draymond walking, so all that speculation was kind of funny because he just seemed like a Warrior lifer. We've kind of had this discussion before, so it's good to see Draymond back. We'll see if Brandon Podziemski can provide something, as a young guy, because their draft picks have been kind of very hit or miss these last few years. Maybe Moses Moody can finally get consistent rotational minutes. Kuminga, we're just relying on those guys. So we'll see. But, the main thing for me, they just got to be better on the road this season, man, which I think they will. I feel like they just had, it got so bad to a point last year where it was just like, this is just kind of who we are. We're not winning road games consistently, man. But Ty Jerome, I think, might be a loss that could be felt a little bit. I feel like he played very solid for them when he did play. Obviously, Dante, you didn't have the money to give to him, so I understand him leaving. I feel like Ty Jerome was retainable. I'm surprised that they didn't give him the contract that he got to leave. So, we'll see how that affects them. And I think Trace Jackson Davis, he was somebody that a lot of people have maybe a higher grade on. He was a good college player. So we'll see how he fits into the mold. But, Draymond coming back is the main piece. So they got that done. The Warriors will still be really good.
I feel so weird about this team going into next year because I keep thinking about it and I'm like, dude, Chris Paul is a Golden State Warrior. Like,
I didn't even mention that.
Is that not just like the strangest thing to y'all? Like, next season's gonna start and Chris Paul is going to be wearing a Golden State Warriors jersey.
Have y'all seen his interviews? It looks like they're holding him at gunpoint to talk about being on the Warriors, bro. It's so I don't think we're gonna be able to really accept it until we see him on the court passing the Steph to Clay, pick and rolls with Draymond. We're not gonna be able to even believe it's true until we actually see it.
Yeah, I'm very curious because I feel like Chris Paul is not even the player he was 2.5 years ago, right? Or even a year and a half ago. The way he was playing, especially early on in the 21-22 playoffs before the end of that Dallas series, there was some great, still clutch Chris Paul moments. He just hasn't really been that guy in a while. But at the same time, he's such a good playmaker that you got to think the ball movement on that team in that lineup has to just be phenomenal. You have Chris Paul, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green all on the same basketball court. Now, we know Clay's going to chuck up them shots. Clay, he not going to be a part of that ball movement. But, all of them feeding Big Loon in the paint, bro, that five, I can just imagine playing some beautiful offensive basketball. So I think they're going to be very fun, even if Chris Paul is regresses even further from what he was even last year, which wouldn't be too surprising because at this point he's going to be 39 next year. It's just the nature of how this thing goes. But overall, if the Warriors got their big three in town, the window is open. They're only a year removed from a championship, and there was some big chemistry issues last year. There was the big road thing last year, and I don't think anything like that can even be replicated if they try. The Warriors, for the entirety of their dynasty, were a good road team, but then last year they were just it was an anomaly. That's really the only way to describe it. I don't even know how something like that is possible for a team that has that much experience playing together and especially just traveling so well over the course of their entire run together. So I think they'll be good. I think they'll be fine. And especially with Jordan Poole being out, which could have caused a lot of awkwardness last year. We don't know the full situation, but I think they'll be revamped. I think they'll be revitalized. And I'm not going to say they're a title favorite or anything, but like we opened with, they're still very much in the picture. That window is still open.
Like you said, Gabe, they're definitely going to be fun. My problem is how practical is Chris Paul on this team, especially on the defensive end of the floor. If you're talking about rolling out lineups that have Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, I'm not so sure how that works on the defensive end. I think there's definitely a lot of nights where that becomes a bit problematic. Dante DiVincenzo is also off the team now. So, again, not great size, but at least someone that can play your 2 spot that can defend a little bit better. So that'll be the interesting thing for them is how do they manage those rotations? How do they manage Chris Paul, Curry, Clay minutes? How they space those guys out in the rotations? And like we mentioned earlier, it's just how do they continue to replace their depth? I mean, Otto Porter's left. Now Dante DiVincenzo's gone. Now Gary Payton's back for next year still, but they just continue to seem to lose 1 or 2 core bench pieces every year. And they just continue to draft guys to replace it. And so far, that hasn't quite done the job. Now, I will give Moses Moody his credit. He looked quite good at points throughout the postseason last year. Maybe that's someone who finally starts to emerge into the rotation, and that's a bit more of a Dante DiVincenzo replacement for them. In which case, great. Maybe Podziemski has a good rookie season, and he can come in and give them some guard minutes as well. But they're definitely going to need some of those guys to step up because they just haven't replaced it adequately otherwise. They're not really free agent players at all over the last couple of years now as far as adding quality depth to this team. So the Chris Paul addition is interesting, but they're definitely going to have a lot of experimentation to start the year to figure out what works and what doesn't between Chris Paul and Curry and Clay and how they make that all work. But on the offensive end, there's definitely going to be some fun moments and some fun nights, especially when guys are hitting some shots and Paul and Curry are just feeding balls left, right, and center to everyone.
Yo.
Hey. Major. Didn't they sign Corey Joseph too?
Yes.
Hey,
Corey Joe, which is a solid sign and a much better
Raptors legend.
shooter and
Raptors legend.
Raptors legend.
Texas Longhorn, Corey Joseph, man. Let us see it. Yeah, the Chris Paul fit is going to be so intriguing to see because this is a fast-paced team. Chris Paul is more of a slower player these days. But I'm excited to see Steph maybe being able to play off the ball a little more because I feel like the last couple of years he's had to be on the ball a lot since, like, Iggy was washed. They didn't really have, like, much backup guard depth to where, you know, Steph could play with somebody. Because for the better part of their dynasty, they always had, like, Iggy. Even, like, before the dynasty started, they had, like, Jarrett Jack. So, like, Steph could play a little more off the ball where he's the most –
respect to Sean Livingston, bro.
Sean Livingston, too. I always forget about Sean. Like, see, they had, like, a lot of guys that they can give the ball, say, hey, let's let Steph roam a little bit off the ball because that's where he's at his best truly is as an off-the-ball threat. So, hopefully we can see that a little more. Defensively, definitely concerning. But if anybody can figure out Steve Kerr, it's the Warriors. So, they could probably make it work, but we'll see.
It just doesn't feel real. It won't feel real to me. Like Chris Paul and Steph Curry playing together, no way.
They borderline hate each other.
That Chris Paul, he's on their team now.
They've been beefing for years. Curry dropped Chris Paul back in the day. I mean, the Warriors just used to abuse the Clippers in the regular season, man.
Hey, bro, fraudulent franchise.
It can't be worse than like the tension with Jordan Poole last year, though. It can't be worse than that, right? Like, there's no way.
Definitely not. It's definitely an upgrade in the morale standpoint, if nothing else, until CP3 starts cursing out Draymond, and then we'll see how that goes. But
that's gonna be funny.
That'll be a fun topic for October or November. But that does bring us to the Los Angeles Lakers, one of the teams that debatably won the free agency period, also had a draft that included Jalen Hood-Schifino and Maxwell Lewis. They kept their guys in Rui and Austin Reeves. They brought in Taurean Prince, brought in Cam Reddish, they brought in Gabe Vincent. Pelinka, over the last 6 months, has redeemed a lot of what he's done over the last couple of years because between the trade deadline and free agency now, he has done very well.
Golf clubs, man.
Cooked, bro. He cooked. Bro, like, I'm just looking like everybody was like, bro, they need to upgrade from D'Angelo Russell. Like, this dude is buns at point guard. And as an Ohio State guy, I cannot sign off on that take. But they kept him and got Gabe Vincent. Like, bro, stop. They kept Rui and they kept Reeves. Like, they kept everybody. And then, like, you know, Dennis Schroeder and Lonnie Walker on the way out. Like, that's some tough losses. But like I said, your replacement for, like, Lonnie is like a Gabe Vincent, like that's sweet. If then Dennis Schroeder's out, but dude, Jalen Hood-Schifino, if he pans out like he should pan out, like he can be a replacement for him within like a year or two for sure. Bringing in like a Torian Prince is just another body to have on the wing. Like he's probably an upgrade from what you lost in Troy Brown. It's like they kept all their guys and were able to add more pieces to really just run it back. And as a team who was one of the best teams in the NBA for the second half of last season, made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals as a 7 seed, like it's looking like this might be like the LeBron last dance, bro. They're well primed for the ability to make one more run at it. I'm very confident they'll be like probably a top 4 seed next year. I don't know if that's hot, but the roster they got and the way that this core played at the end of last season, I think they're top 4.
Look, for as much shit as we gave Rob Pelinka over the course of this podcast existence, like you said, Devin, he's really redeemed himself over the last, 5-6 months. He's made a lot of really good moves. First off, retaining pretty much everybody that was of importance. I like that a lot. I thought the only key guys they lost was like Schroeder, Brown, and Walker. Outside of Schroeder, like Troy Brown was really in and out the rotation. Same thing with Lonnie Walker. Even though like Lonnie did have a couple good playoff games, those guys are replaceable. Bringing back everybody, bringing back Reeves for the value that he got, I feel like was a really, really good move. Even though, say what you want about D'Lo, he was very key for them in some series, and at some points during that second half of the season where LeBron was out, he was having some really big games. So, bringing him back, I feel like that's very good value for D'Angelo Russell too. So I feel like that's a W re-signing. And the draft pick, Hood-Schifino and Maxwell Lewis, I like those moves a lot. Good value. They were at a very good spot with the 17th pick because somebody was going to fall to them, and it's just about taking the best guy, the best guard there. I feel like he's going to fit in well, can provide a little bit of everything from that guard spot. The only 2 moves, I do like Torian Prince though. Like I feel like he's become very like underrated, I would say, like over the course of the last few years. Like what you're getting from Torian Prince. He's going to score like 9-10 points a game, shoot close to 40% from 3, be a solid defender. A lot of the teams would like Torian Prince. They got him for very, very, very good value. The only moves that I'm not moved by is like Cam Reddish and Jackson Hayes. Very low value moves though. Like if they don't pan out, that's fine because you didn't sign them for big money, very short contracts. But if they do, like if Cam Reddish can put together some type of elite month type of resurgence, that's a W move. Jackson Hayes, I'm not really too moved on Jackson Hayes at all as an NBA player, but maybe they can get something out of him just being a backup player. And there might be still more moves to be made. We'll see.
You got to respect your Cincinnati legends there, buddy. Xavier legend Jackson Hayes.
Xavier.
Yeah.
No.
He went to Texas.
Oh,
Texas.
no, he went to Saint X. It's Saint Xavier, the high school.
No, he went to Moeller.
Bro, Moeller, bro. He's still, bro, come on. Delete that. That didn't happen.
Shout out to Mo in the chat, though, man. Shout out to Mo. But,
if they can get – shout out to Cincinnati Legends, bro. Come on.
If they can get anything out of Jackson Hayes, that's fine because Anthony Davis is the guy anyway. So if they can get anything out of Jackson Hayes, okay, that's a cool sign.
Yeah, it's too bad because Jackson Hayes is someone that I really liked coming into the league and has really been more athlete than basketball player at this point, unfortunately. But for the most part, if he can be a depth big that doesn't have to see the court that much, more than fine. And the rest of what they've done has been great. Cam Reddish can be a depth wing who probably isn't going to get a ton of run, but as a depth guy is fine. Torian Prince signing is great. I think that's a great upgrade for them on the wing. You keep Rui, you keep Reeves, you keep D'Angelo. I don't think anyone had Gabe Vincent going to the Lakers on their radar, and that just somehow ends up being where he goes, despite all the other teams that were potentially going to be involved in the point guard merry-go-round between the Heat, between the Raptors, between the Bulls, who ended up getting Javon Carter. That was a very good pickup for the Lakers. They have a ton of depth there now at the guard spot. They just have a lot. When you talk about a team that had very poor depth 12 months ago, and you now look at this roster and where they're at now, they've improved significantly in that department. I think they've made some really good signings that fit what this team needs. And there's just no way to look at this offseason and say there's really any significant cons to it. You lose a couple of depth guards, but they did more than fine to replace that. So I think they're in a great spot heading into the next year. And that great play that we saw at the back end of last year should be something they can start next year with like we said with the Clippers, just to a slightly lesser extent, health is just going to be the main concern.
Another year of Darvin Ham being a head coach too, I think will help. Didn't even mention the Gabe Vincent move. Like that's an upgrade over a backup guard potentially, and like Dennis Schroeder, who's getting starter minutes at times. So, they are a deep team, and as long as their guys can stay healthy and AD continues to play at a high level, this team's going to be very, very, very scary next year.
They're full of playoff performers too, bro. Like Rui played big, Reeves played big, and Gabe Vincent was huge in the Heat's finals run. So like for a team that's just retooling and reinforcing the walls to try and make it to the finals, bro, like I'm very impressed.
No, definitely. They've done very well this offseason, and they've put themselves in a great spot to be able to contend again next year for at least one more year with LeBron still on the roster. But let's move to the team that they stole Taurean Prince from, who they were surprisingly enough willing to let Taurean Prince go, and that is the Timberwolves. They replaced him with Lakers wing Troy Brown Jr. Shake Milton is in, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is back. But letting go of Taurean Prince was definitely an interesting decision, to say the least.
A tough one. But anytime you bring back Nickeil Alexander-Walker, it's an A+ offseason, man. So we're going to continue to see his growth as a player, most improved candidate next season. But no, all seriousness, very, very mild offseason over them. I mean, I guess replacing Taurean Prince in some way, if Troy Brown can do anything, that's okay, I guess. But like Shake Milton seems very redundant, like with Jalen Noel being on the roster. Like those are just two very similar guys. Who knows who's even better? I don't know. I know Dev will probably go Jalen Noel's better, but I don't know. Not really moved. Getting Leonard Miller was a cool draft pick, but I don't know. This team, I'm just waiting for the day like Cat gets traded. I feel like that's the only thing that's going to move me about this team is like a big trade, and it would have to involve Karl-Anthony Towns, to be honest.
That was going to be like my whole point is there's no way they're done if they expect to get better this offseason, because moves they've made so far, like cool to bring back Nickeil. He played very well in the playoffs and the play-in for them. Like he deserved that contract. Leonard Miller, like he could be a good pickup for them in the draft, but as far as like substantial needle movers right now for a team that's had back-to-back playoff appearances now, but should probably be working to establish themselves above the play-in range is the next step at least. They need that big move, and that big move is the Cat trade, because I've been the guy who said forever, when you buy in for Gobert that hard, you have to keep him. And if that means it's him, Ant, and whoever you can get back for Cat, so be it. But they're going to need to make a big move, I think.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that eventually, whether that's in this offseason thing, whether that's next offseason, whether that's 2 years down the road. That remains to be seen. But next year, they're going to be paying Ant his bag, Cat his bag, and Gobert his bag. So I would not be surprised at all that sometime next summer, one of Cat or Gobert is moved. The more likely option is going to be Cat, because they just gave up the house and the farm to get Rudy Gobert. So we'll see where that happens. It could happen this summer, but I'd imagine they probably try and run it back with this group one more time, especially considering the fact they might internally be hoping that with Cat healthy for hopefully the majority of the season, they can have a little bit more success this year. And if all else fails, they can move off of him next summer. But I'd find it hard to imagine that long term they're holding on to all three of those guys on max deals.
That would just be delusional for them to do that. But obviously, if the Cat trade's not out there, don't force it, because, maybe Cat has like a all-star, all-NBA caliber season, and then you can pull the trigger while his value is at its highest. So, but if it moves out there, I pray to God that they just make it. It may make them look worse on paper, but sometimes trades like that can help you just get better, especially down the line, because they don't have any like real good draft flexibility over the next half decade or so. So
I cannot believe that y'all both had this team as a 1 seed last year, bro. That is still a crazy take to me. It was a crazy take to me when y'all made it, and it just looks even crazier now, bro. Like,
good thing those videos didn't get that many views.
And maybe
nobody remembers except for Gabe.
maybe Anthony Edwards next year is the Anthony Edwards y'all thought you were getting last year, because he was great. He was
It took a
great. Don't
good
get me
leap.
wrong, but
Took a good
he
leap
was
last
not. He
year.
was not like the MVP front runner that y'all thought he was about to be.
You know, just like the kill, we're just a couple years early.
He's 2 years away from being 2 years away, man.
Yeah, we're about to see the kill jump this year, and maybe next year we'll see Anthony Edwards be an MVP candidate.
Then Anthony Edwards will be an MVP candidate, and Nikhil will be a borderline all-star, and all will be good in the world.
Yes. They'll trade Cat, get a lot of depth pieces, and then it's going to be Ant, Nikhil as their 1-2. Gobert still being a solid big. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
The personal
vision.
views of Devin and Tyrik do not represent the views of the podcast as a whole. I am not.
What do you mean? We're 2/3 of the pod.
I as a whole, I'm saying not me. That might be the majority of the pod. However, all of 3 Point Weekly's public views do not respect. They do not align with the personal views of GabeSlidIn. So do not come at me for that.
We do sound like we bet like our entire life savings on the Timberwolves being like a championship team within the next few years.
Y'all do this every year, bro.
No, that's fine. Just wait till we get Jacob on here, Gabe. Then you'll have 3 of us.
Oh my God. I would choose to be absent that week.
I was about to say we do sound like Jelson right now. Like we're really just banking on Timberwolves figuring it out.
Jelson said there's a shooter in Minnesota who might just be the best player in the NBA. Bro.
Who did he say that about?
Cat.
Oh, that's crazy.
That's public on the internet. He's just remember that.
No, that was pretty crazy. But let's move on to the New Orleans Pelicans, who had a pretty quiet offseason themselves. Saw Josh Richardson and Jackson Hayes leave, brought in one of the best shooters in the draft in Jordan Hawkins, and made sure they locked up Herb Jones long term, which was great to see. Very well-deserved bag. But all in all, it's not anything too exciting for the Pelicans. And like a few teams we've talked about tonight, the key is just going to continue to be their health.
Yeah, I'm not moved by this offseason at all. The only thing they need to lock up is Zion away from these females, bro, because, dog, what the hell are you doing? I'm not even trying to say it for content, bro. Just please focus on basketball, bro. And I'm not one of those guys that's like, oh, you're an NBA player, like you're not allowed to have a life outside of this, but bro.
Ball is life.
Come on. We can do a little bit. We can do a little bit better than this. And for a guy who's not on the court, bro, you need to spend your time in the gym and not with Mariah Mills. I'll tell you that. So we need to see some health.
On the court, though, man, I just need to see Bi and Zion play like at least 60 games, bro. At least, come on, man. If we see these guys healthy, we saw last season when just one of either Zion or Brandon Ingram were healthy, they were a pretty good basketball team. More so when Zion was the healthy guy. They were a really good basketball team. So that's the main thing. We're not asking them to play all 82. Just play like 60, please.
Be eligible for All NBA, bro. Be eligible for All NBA.
If they get that, this is a top 5 seed. Like, that's how good this team is, man. They're very talented. The Hawkins pick in the draft, he just fell to them so perfectly. The best shooter in the draft in my book. The most versatile shooter in the draft, too, just the way he can do it off pin downs, off the dribble. Just catch and shoot. I feel like he's a real sniper. And that's on top of Trey Murphy really developing and becoming a knockdown shooter and really a guy that's more than just shooting, put the ball on the floor, can create for himself a little bit. So they got the talent, man. It's just health. It's really just health, man, because this team, they were too good last season when they had most of their guys there. It's just about staying healthy, man. That is the only thing that I'm concerned about.
I'll give him second to Grady Dick.
Bias.
That boy in Toronto is special.
Bias.
We do have to support our incoming Raptors legends, but that does bring us to OKC, who have brought in a ton of guys this summer and have not gotten rid of anyone yet. And don't ask me how they continue to just bring in guys, because I think they now have about 20 dudes on their roster. And I look at some of their additions and I'm like, yeah, I don't mind it, but where do you fit? And this is probably more so than any other offseason, as they've just been continuing to add draft picks and trade for dudes. where they are really at a point where, like, they waived Isaiah Roby last year. They probably have about 3 or 4 of those decisions this summer to make, whether it's trades, whether it's waves. There's some dudes that finally got to go.
Yeah. Casey Wallace in, Trey Mann's probably out. I like Casey Wallace a lot. Do I like him in OKC? I don't know, because I don't know how much time he's really going to get. Because Shea and Giddey, they're going to have the ball in their hands a lot. J-Dub going to have the ball in his hands a decent amount too. So I kind of didn't like that draft pick, but he was like the best guy available on most people's boards. So I guess that's kind of what OKC does, where they take a project guy like they did last year with Deang. I don't know. Cool offseason, I guess. They didn't lose anybody, which is just insane. Like you said, Devin, they're going to cut some guys that are actually good NBA players or trade them for next to nothing. So I don't know. They still have too many picks at their disposal for their own good, but basically, internal improvement is the main thing for them. Shea getting better, Giddey getting better, J-Dub, Chet. We'll see how he's going to look. He looks dominant in the summer league. I know summer league, but I think a lot of that can translate to the real court. So, that's what I'm mainly excited for them. But yeah, they're going to cut some guys that are really solid NBA players.
Man, I feel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they really had a chance to get Derek Lively in. That would have been such a good pickup for them. And I was not a very big fan of the Case and Wallace pick for them. I just felt like the guard minutes were pretty set there. And I'm like, they need a guy who can be a strong side big next to Chet. And I don't think they really accomplished that. I felt like roster-wise, that was kind of their biggest weakness positionally, because they've got the pieces all throughout the rest of the roster. Guards, wings, like they have a lot of guys on this roster. And that internal improvement will take them a long way. I will say, I wish they could have cashed in some of the assets just to kind of condense things a little better, because they turned themselves into a better team. They're finally starting to win some games, but then Chet should even supplement that even more so. And it's like, all right, let's take that jump. But I don't really feel like the best move was there for them. So I respect the fact that they didn't make a move just to make a move as far as just that big splash. Like, obviously, they brought in a ton of random guys this offseason. But I think they have about a year. And then, like you guys are saying, like they have to cut and waive or trade for nothing, like these really actually quality players. It's like, I hope for them the big move can arrive sooner than later, because you want to cash that in, because you got all these assets and you don't want to just have that be for nothing. Like you want to really make that matter and mean something and be able to take you from, a nice, fun, building small market team that a lot of people are riding behind to a team that's actually a contender and back to a place they really haven't been since, I'd argue, 2016. I mean, they were good for years in like the Paul George Russ era, but I mean, they didn't win any playoff series. Like they were never really like contenders. So I think move away with all the assets they have from getting back to that tier, because there's so much talent here. And not to say that would be like 1 year down the road, but give me like a 3-year projection, and I think this team could be, especially where Memphis is right now, if not a little bit better.
I'll correct you real quick. So Dallas had the 10th pick. They took Case and Wallace for OKC. So they didn't really have an opportunity to have Lively, because Dallas wanted him for sure, but I guess OKC wanted Case and Wallace more. They made that trade.
Gotcha. Okay. With the trade, it made it a little bit confusing.
Yeah, for sure.
It was not entirely clear if they could get him or not.
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate they couldn't, because I think he would have been a really good fit here. But ultimately, the problem has never been a lack of talent or a lack of pieces here in OKC, especially last year with what we saw from this team. Now that Chet comes in, they just need to make the right moves through the next 12 to 24 months to go from being a team that I think is already going to be pretty good this year. I've been publicly on the record saying I think they're going to be a top 4 seed this year, but they're still a far way away from being that to then jumping to a point where they can regularly be a second, third round team in the postseason. I think there's still a long way to go for that. I think there's a couple of moves that have to be made for that. There's probably a star that has to be added, or some depth pieces that have to be reshuffled and moved off of and traded for, or a free agency signing here or there. There's some pieces that had to be moved, and this is probably the first pivotal moment of an offseason where they're going to have to make that, and that's going to be not necessarily deciding the outcome of this season, but it might show in the repercussions of how OKC do 12, 16, 18 months down the line.
Top 4 seed. Interesting. I like that.
Bro. Whew, Devin.
I'm
That's
standing
still
by
a
it.
hot one,
I'm
man.
standing by it.
That's a hot
I've been
one,
saying
man.
it since April. I'm gonna stand by it.
You're
Okay.
dude, your hot Wolves pick last year did not pan out. I do hope for your sake this one does. I mean, my 4 seed last year was New Orleans, and they let me down, and it was for health reasons. And I feel like the only way OKC might be below like 6 is health reasons because they look really good, but we know there's been a lot of times. Well, I mean, the Shea stuff, like he would get like shut down early. So I mean, kind of, sort of health ish, but then like Chet, he just missed a whole year and a little bit of question marks. But assuming they're healthy, they should be quite good.
I think there's a chance because Shea's that good. That's first. Shea is that good. Guys continue to improve. Giddey, J Dub, Chet coming in. I think he's going to be very impactful from day one. And I think the rest of the West, like outside of a couple teams, didn't really get that much better or they got worse. So I think there's a chance if they come out hot, they get a good start like how Sacramento did last year. They could be next year's Kings. I don't think that's a crazy take, to be honest. People would have said Sac as a top 4 seed last year was crazy, and they were able to get the 3 seed. So, there's a team that could definitely do it each year. We all had, I think, New Orleans as a top 4 seed last year, and we picked the wrong young team to jump up there.
Yeah, no, definitely could be the team that makes the jump this year, but we'll see if they end up being the one to do so. I want to jump to the Mavericks here before we run out of time because they're one of the teams that have had one of the most intriguing off seasons of the summer. Seth Curry has been brought back. Kyrie Irving has been brought back. Derek Lively was brought in. They've now brought in Grant Williams to give them a little bit more wing depth, although unfortunately Reggie Bullock has seen his way out in doing so. But although the Mavericks did have a rough end of last year, and although they do have a lot of depth issues, they've done a pretty good job this summer so far of getting what they need on this team to complement Luka and Kyrie.
Dante Exum is back.
God.
I had to get that in there. You could go Tyrik, but I had to get that in there.
Yeah, let's get serious for a second, man. It sucks that Matisse, his contract got matched because I think that would have been another very, very good pickup, especially if he could have shot the ball close to what he did last year when he got to Portland. That would have been an amazing pickup. But even then, Grant Williams is a really good signing. Getting Kyrie back is obviously the biggest domino. I love their draft. Derek Lively, I feel like, fits the need. And I'm so mad that they still brought back Dwight Powell. But I'm just praying to the basketball gods that at most he is just in their backup big rotation. I pray to God he's not getting started minutes. Because if so, that defeats everything that they did this offseason. So hopefully Jason Kidd is smart enough and the dirt that Dwight Powell has on Mark Cuban or whoever in the organization is not big enough to where he's getting starter minutes. That's what I hope the most. Even then, you got Kyrie back, which is just key. Very good draft. You got better wings this year. If Rashawn Holmes can get back to some type of quality form and he can be the real backup big, I like that a lot. This team is a lot more well-rounded than what they had after the deadline last season, so they should be better. If Jason Kidd can get back to coaching like he did in year one, they should be better. They should be better. I really like their all-season, but I got to see it on the court too to really buy in.
Yeah, they were thin after that trade deadline last year, and it showed. It very much showed in their fall-off at the end of the year, but I think the fact that they got Kyrie Irving to buy back in and stick around for a couple more years and really give this duo a chance, like this roster looks real solid around them. Like they really gave the front office some time to go to work and said, "Hey, let's see what you can do here." And they didn't let them down. Just from top to bottom, it looks like this roster should be about just 8 or 9 deep of real quality pieces, from some solid bigs to some solid wings, and hopefully we don't see some Dwight Powell starter minutes anymore. Like that era should be over for especially Tyrik's sake here. But yeah, I don't expect that team to this team 100% guarantee is not going to be that same like team we saw at the end of last year that plays zero defense and is at the bottom of the league, loses every game and doesn't even make the play. Like that's gone. There's a 0% chance this roster to me finishes. They gotta be at least like 7, right? Like, because we say a lot of teams like this team's gonna be top 6, and there's only so many teams you can say that for. This is one of those teams that just looking at it on paper is very hard to say that about. Kyrie's always a big question mark, but we're kind of putting question marks aside, I feel like, for most of these projections. So I'll say question marks aside, this team should be top 6.
I'm not
They made
sold.
the right moves. They made, in my opinion, they made the right moves to do so. But
They
I can
drafted
see,
real well, too.
I can see the concerns though. At the same time, Dev, I can see him.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if they're top 6, but man, like they improved their wing depth, but they improved their wing depth from being ass to okay. Like it's still not anything great. I mean, when you're looking at your primary wings being like Grant Williams, and then like you're relying on a rookie. Are you playing Dante Exum at the 3 at times? Like it is going to be interesting to see how they manage some of those minutes. I mean, Bullock and Finney Smith are both gone now, so that's what you were relying on last year, given you've brought in some replacements. But it's still going to be interesting to see. I like their front court a lot more. I still don't think it's great, but I think it's better. I think it fits their needs more. I think Rashawn Holmes with Luka, especially, is going to be a very good pairing to have. So I like what they've done. Is it enough? I don't know, but I think they should be in a much better position than they were. That's for sure.
I think the good thing is if Kyrie and Luka can be as good as we hope as a duo, and as good as Luka is, as long as your depth isn't fucking trash, Luka's gonna give you a chance to do some good things. So as long as Grant can still be a 40% 3-point shooter, good defender, Tim Hardaway's still there, as long as he can be still productive, shoot the ball well, and as long as they're bigs, I know they're relying on Derek Lively to be a very productive rookie. As long as they can get solid production from their front court guys, they should be a lot better. Like they shouldn't be losing to the Charlotte Hornets at the end of the season when they need to win. Should be a lot better.
They need year 1 Jason Kidd, man. Like year 1 Jason Kidd, he had that defense defending, for lack of a better term. Year 2, not so much. And the closest arc I can compare it to that's just very fresh in the memory is Tom Thibodeau. Came in year 1 with the Knicks. Very good, very stout defense. Year 2, big time fall off for the team as a whole. Year 3, really picked it back up, and that was with the Jalen Brunson addition, of course, and really reinforcing that roster. Made some talent changes. I don't want to say it was all him, but Dallas did a very similar thing. There's a significantly different roster than they had a year ago, or even the second half of last season, which is just a mere probably 4 months ago right now. So a lot of changes here very quickly, but if he can just do whatever he was doing on the defensive side of the ball year 1, the offensive talent is there. His scheming just will need to make up for some of the roster deficiencies on the defensive side, and they can be a very quality team, at least for the regular season. Sometimes defensive talent usually comes back to bite you in the playoffs, but you have superstar talent, could supplement it a little bit, maybe win you a playoff series if you're lucky to. I mean, they went that far before. It's tough to say because there's a lot of good teams in the West, but with the superstar talent they have, he gives you a chance, like you said.
Okay, we got a few teams left. I know we're very short on time. Portland, I think we can agree, is kind of incomplete until Dame gets moved, if he gets moved.
Yeah,
we all
to be discussed at a later date.
We've discussed our concerns about Jeremy Grant's contract, but that's just kind of the luck of Dame requesting out. San Antonio, you draft Wemby, W fucking offseason. We know that. Utah's interesting because of the John Collins trade, but I want to get to Houston because I know Dev has some harsh words to say about the Rockets. So, Devin, take the floor, man. We need another all-time classic rant from you, man.
It's full screen time.
Is it?
It is.
It is.
Okay, I'll full screen time. It's got to be done. Okay. Here's my thing with Houston. I'm not even mad at them signing Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. That's literally not even the frustrating part of this offseason. The frustrating part was that they decided to just say, fuck developing their young talent that isn't a Jalen Green, a Jabari Smith, an Alperen Sengun. Screw everyone that isn't one of the top end guys. And let's just semi-commit to winning now because we got Udoka and because we have cap space. They put themselves in a position where they got rid of a first-round pick from a year ago in Ty Washington, a first-round pick from 2 years ago in Usman Garuba, one of their best rotational wing players in KJ Martin, a first-round pick from 2 years ago in Josh Christopher, and a couple of second-round picks. And part of that was to get back Dillon Brooks because they didn't even use cap space to get him. They decided that they should sign and trade to get Dillon Brooks. Despite having all of the cap space, they used it all up before they even got Dillon Brooks. They used it on Fred. They used it on Jock Landale. And then they had to go and sign and trade for Dillon Brooks. It was a very, very weird offseason in that regard. And now you've put yourself in a situation where you didn't move off of some of these vets or some of these young guys just to let Jalen Green have more opportunity, to let other young guys have more opportunity. You brought in a couple of vets. You bring in a Jeff Green who, yes, is good to have in the locker room, but is also going to take up the minutes that someone like an Usman Garuba was going to play. So why didn't you just keep an Usman Garuba? Like, it was very confusing why they just decided to say, let's not care about the youth anymore. I feel like if they had done this a year or two down the road, maybe it would have made a little bit more sense, but they have guys who have shown flashes, or especially in the case of Ty Washington, they haven't even given an opportunity to yet, and they just decided to give up on to compete for the play-in instead next year. Like, especially in the Usman Garuba and Ty Washington case, they move off of those guys to Atlanta for essentially nothing, and they move off of KJ Martin for a couple of seconds, which at this point is what for them? I mean, a couple of extra seconds is not doing anything significant for them. They already have a ton of young talent on the roster. You just traded away young talent that probably isn't going to be better than what you're going to get with said second round picks. So ultimately, I don't mind signing Fred. I don't mind signing Dillon Brooks. Are the contracts ugly? Yes. Are they bad? Yes. Is the Fred VanVleet contract probably one of the worst deals in the league? Yes. But especially in Fred's case, his salary's off the books before Jalen Green or any of those guys are getting paid. Long term, it doesn't handicap you, so I don't hate it. But it's the fact that you're giving up on your youth so quickly, and now you're putting the youth that's already on the roster in such an awkward spot because Terry Eason or Cam Whitmore could have slid into that starting 3 spot and developed well, but now they're going to be fighting for bench minutes amongst each other as Dillon Brooks gets to start. And now Alman Thompson is going to have Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet. So is Alman starting at the 3 and is Brooks coming off the bench? Or did you just draft a guy in the top 5 of a draft to come off of your bench? It's a very weird scenario they have in Houston. They got a head coach who's been in a win now environment, and they decided they also had to be win now. And I think it's going to be fine for this year, and we're not going to see the repercussions of it yet. They'll be a better team, and they'll probably be in the plan, or at least in that conversation. But I think they've really limited themselves as far as the direction of this team and having a proper rebuild. I think they were probably a year or two out still. And instead of finishing it off, they'd have decided to cut it short. Let's compete now. And it might end up hurting them in a couple of years when A, they don't have these depth guys that would have developed like KJ Martin, like Josh Christopher, like Usman Garuba. And B, they're probably going to hamper the development of young guys on the team as guys like Cam Whitmore, as guys like Alman Thompson just struggle to get minutes because they just gave a bunch of money to dudes that are going to eat up those minutes. And yes, might be veterans on the team that will help the culture, but is also probably going to impact the development of those guys. That's it for me. But yeah, that's just, it's a weird one.
Well,
He cooked.
Said, man. Well said. It's like they're making moves that like a team that is closer. Like if an OKC did something like this, it would be more understandable. But you're kind of giving up on talent, going and signing guys like Fred, who's good, borderline all-star type good. Dillon Brooks, who's good, giving them big bags, and then just you're going to hinder the development of all your young guys. Jalen Green might not even develop how they want him to. It's just, like you said it so perfectly. They're doing all this to compete for maybe the play-in. A team that has been bottom of the West for the last three or so years, doing this to compete for the play-in. And it's just so frustrating because I feel like every year since they traded away James Harden that they've drafted, I've said after every draft, they are one of the winners of the draft. They did one of the best jobs in the draft. And just to give up on a lot of those guys so early, it's just so frustrating. And to make it where it's going to be difficult for Thompson, for Whitmore, and guys to get consistent minutes and develop, it's even more frustrating, man. I wish them well, but this will probably come back to bite them in the long run for sure.
Bro, this might be my bias, but like, I really wasn't even that mad at the Fred signing, and you definitely touched on it in your piece, Devin, of like he'll be off the books by the time people get paid, and he was like he's a championship winning player. Like he comes from a good system, a good front office, a good organization overall. And I think the Rockets' main goal should have been just to bring order to chaos. There was a lot of talent on the roster, but the common term thrown around is, oh, they just play AAU basketball out there. And it's like you bring in Fred because you got to spend that money on somebody, and he could be a decent mentor for these guys, no matter how you feel about his actual talent level right now. He could be good in that role. Bring in Jeff Green, he's going to be good in that role. And then you bring in Ime Udoka, who, for the troubles he's had, is a damn good basketball coach that is a big player coach and can get guys to buy into his system. That was all looking really good, and there was just so much young talent. You're talking about a possible lineup of, Jalen Green, Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore, and Sengun as like 4-year 5 starters. I mean, can't complain about that. Where they really started going wrong for me was definitely that Dylan Brooks signing and then just getting off of all of their depth young guys. And even if you're giving up on them, it's just like you said with the Dylan Brooks signing, like he's getting all of these starters minutes. And not only that, when I say bring order to chaos, Dylan Brooks is chaos. He was one of the most chaotic players last season. And for a franchise who's in such disarray, you bring in the guy who the team that he was just on said, yeah, we're not bringing you back in any circumstance. It wasn't, oh, you want too much money, we don't want to pay you 20 mil. It's, no, you're gone. You're done. You are not being brought back. That's not the kind of players that you need to bring in. Now, even if they spent more money, if they gave Dylan Brooks' contract to a different guy of a similar skill set who's even older, it's like, oh, man, that does kind of suck. But I do get good older, good mentors, good veterans just to have around these guys before they make money. Say it's another 2-3 year deal. But the Dylan Brooks energy does not seem like a good mix. And I know Memphis's culture that Dylan Brooks was a big part of did lead to a lot of winning, but there was a lot more pieces in place. And while he was sort of the heart and soul of the team, he wasn't even really like a top 2 or 3 player. And even though he would take some shots he shouldn't have, like he was not a main contributor. I feel like because a lot of these guys are so young, who's going to tell Dylan Brooks not to take these shots? Who's going to hold him in check? There's not a Ja Morant to take the ball out of his hands and be like, nah, this is my time. I'm going to take over. Like, yeah, we've seen Jalen Green be a little bit of a shot chucker sometimes. And so that means even with good play, he could take the ball out of his hands. But like at the end of the day, this dude is way older than Jalen Green. Like it's just how it goes. Like that signing was really what just put a sour taste in it for me. Even if the Fred VanVleet contract was objectively pretty poor as well.
Yeah, just a lot of frustrations with the offseason as a whole. There's no doubt about it. We'll see how their development goes. Maybe they surprise us and it all works out. But I feel like there's a lot of guys that need a lot of touches and a lot of development, and there's just not enough to go around. But we'll trust Ime for the time being, and we'll see what he can do. But it's going to be not that it was a very easy environment to switch into as a first-year head coach in Boston, but it's going to be a very, very different environment from the we need to win now with a good team environment that he had in Boston with we're now expecting you to win now with a very young team that has a lot of minutes and a lot of rotations to figure out in Houston. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out.
W way to wrap up the pod, man.
Very, very, very interesting to say the least.
Definitely. But be sure to let us know what you guys think about the Rockets offseason down below, as well as any of these other Western Conference off seasons that we did discuss. If you guys did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and hit the subscribe button down below. We will be sure to have all of our thoughts on many different Eastern and Western Conference off seasons live throughout the next couple of weeks as videos. So be sure to check tune for that. And we will see you guys next week. Peace.